Hi, folks. Welcome to another episode of This Week in Hockey East with Bridgette Prue. I'm Eric Galanti. Exciting stuff so far in our college hockey season. We can't wait to talk about more big games this week. And it starts with our Friday Night Hockey East on NESN game this week, which will feature the Maine Black Bears coming off a big weekend against Boston University. They will travel to UMass, who's been off to a strong start this year as well. Really good showcase series Thursday, Friday. Friday will be on NESN. Bridgette, let's start with Maine and their big weekend against BU.
Yeah, Maine coming into this UMass series on a 3-game win streak. You mentioned the sweep of BU, but a player that's been really good for them in the last stretch has been Justin Poirier, and he's going to be our Service Credit Union scoring leader. He had 3 goals and 2 assists last weekend against BU, but he's had 5 goals in his last 4 games. He's on a 4-game goal streak. He's just building off what was a great October for him, just beginning his NCAA career. He was named the Pro Ambitions Rookie of the Month of October, so he's just keeping going. He's a person to keep an eye on in this weekend series against UMass. And 2 other guys I wanted to spotlight from that BU weekend, Charlie Russell and Owen Fowler, both had good weekends. They both had 2 goals in the weekend series. And because Maine was able to beat BU and really run up the scores in some of these games, they were 2 really high scoring games, almost surprisingly, because you think of BU with Yegorov and you think of Maine with Albin Boya as being 2 of the best goalies, in Hockey East and maybe in the country. But the games ended up being really high scoring. It was a 5-4 win for Maine on Friday and an 8-5 win for Maine over BU on Saturday. So those were higher scoring than I think a lot of people would have expected. And what it did for Maine was it jumped them in the USCHO.com poll with those 2 big wins against a highly ranked team. They go from 12th to 6th in the USCHO.com poll, and they got scoring from all over on Saturday. They had a power play goal, they had a shorthanded goal, they had an empty net goal. They found ways to score against a pretty good BU team.
Yeah, I think one of the interesting things too is, they had a little bit of a, slide that game against Quinnipiac where they had a lead and then the series against Colgate. But, they've done all this, as you said, without that elite Albin Boya yet. You look at where his numbers are right now to go slightly advanced stats on you, Steve Metcalf here. He has a negative differential between his goals allowed versus what he's expected to allow. And the reason that I say that is that he was so good last year, and you would expect him to get back to that at some point. So the fact that they're 5-2 without that elite Albin Boya yet, as soon as he gets to that point, which I think we all think he will, watch out for this Maine team. So I think that's the real positive when it comes to Maine right now. You look at what UMass brings into this series. I think when we talked with Greg Carville, he talked about how he really liked how the schedule built this year, right? Started with a couple of non-conference games, had the 1 conference game against Northeastern. Then they built with a road trip out to Omaha. Then it built up a little more with Cornell last weekend, who they ended up splitting with. And now you're really thrown into the fire with Maine. 3 splits of their weekends in a row. This is going to be a theme with basically every team we talk about, Bridgette. They had the NU Bentley weekend they split. They split at Omaha. They split with Cornell in low-scoring games. But it's kind of crazy here. Starting with that Cornell series, they're going to play 8 straight games against teams that are currently ranked. 10 of 11 to finish the first half, and they start the second half with BU. So as of today, it's a stretch of 12 of 13 games against ranked teams. And a lot of those are on the road. They've played a lot of home games early in the season, so this series becomes important. We're going to see UMass a couple of times on NESN in the next few weeks, so we'll dive into them and get a chance to talk about them. But one piece that's really important to mention is Jack Musa, who this week was named the Hockey East Player of the Month of October. He's averaging more than a point per game so far this year. It's no surprise to see him. I don't even want to say jump, right? Because he was so good last year. It almost feels unfair to say he's taken a jump, but he just continues to get better. Greg Carville mentioned he's continued to get faster. The puck's off his stick faster this year. He was also named to the U.S. College Select Team that's going to participate in the Spangler Cup this year. Joey Muldowney, also from Hockey East, will be in that tournament, so I think that's very deserved from Jack Musa. So really excited to see what we get from him and what we get from a UMass team, which has shown some offensive firepower and what could be a high-scoring game again, but could be a game with really good goaltenders. So it'll be interesting, Maine and UMass. There's always big games across the men's slate. Another one is UConn and Providence. And to the point that we've been talking about, Bridgette, both of these teams, have split a lot of their weekends so far.
Yeah, and Providence 15th ranked team in the country coming into this weekend, and they're 3-3-1, so dead even coming in their record earlier in the season, though they have been a little bit better as of late, 3-1-1 in their last 5 games, and they're coming off a weekend split against UMass Lowell. They get a 5-2 win on the Friday game. They lose 5-1 in the Saturday game, and they split goaltenders this weekend. So Philip Svedback playing on Friday, Jack Parsons playing the Saturday game. He had the loss. Svedback, obviously the Bruins draft pick. He started 6 of the 7 games, though, so you're still seeing a majority of him in net. His goals against average a little bit up above average, right around 3 goals against per game. And Lehman said after the loss on Saturday, we're just giving away some free goals. He didn't like how they played out in front of their net, just a little bit of sloppy hockey. And that Saturday nights are always the tougher nights in leagues because everybody is coming and knows what to expect for the second game of the weekend series. There's one player in particular in this matchup on the PC side I want to highlight. PC's 1 goal Saturday came from Jonathan Fauchon, and he's now on a 3-game goal streak. He's one of PC's guys who came from the CHL. He was the QMJHL MVP last season, 103 points in 64 games, just crazy numbers. And you'll recognize these names. He was among the company of, he was a CHL Player of the Year finalist last year alongside Gavin McKenna and Michael Misa. So in great company when he came over from the CHL. He's got 4 power play goals. Those are all his goals. They were all scored on the power play, and PC special teams have been pretty good, 30%, just about 30% on their power play so far this year.
Yeah, and they'll take on a UConn team that has split basically every weekend so far. Last weekend, a tie against Harvard, and then a nice win against Merrimack where they scored a bunch of goals in the third period. I know we've been talking a lot about Lawton Zacher, but Tyler Muslik's been really good for UConn, and that's a very positive sign. He's up to a .929 save percentage this year, getting the lion's share of the work after last year splitting time with Callum Tung. So good series there, Providence and UConn. Excited to see what we get. We have plenty more to come, including a look at the other Nesson game this weekend. Maine will take on BU, and we're going to talk to Maine head coach Molly Engstrom coming up after the break on This Week in Hockey East.
Welcome back to This Week in Hockey East. We're happy to be joined by Maine women's hockey head coach Molly Engstrom, presented by Boston Harbor Hotel. Plan your fall getaway today at bostonharborhotel.com to experience Boston's best waterfront views. I'm Bridgette Crew here with Eric Galanti. Just a minute away from talking to Molly Engstrom, the head coach of Maine. Eric, anything you're excited to talk to her about?
Yeah, I think we're looking so forward to all the upgrades at Alfond Arena, right? That's one of the things we talked about with Ben Barr a couple of weeks ago. And it's such a leveling factor, right? With all of these schools are getting more and more more and more upgrades, right? And we see more and more programs finding these buildings, putting resources in. That's so important on both the men's side and the women's side. And it's a Maine team that's played a really tough schedule so far. That's going to continue this weekend with BU, Bridgette. It's been impressive how they've been able to get some good efforts out of it, right? They have the win against Colgate. They put up decent results early in the season against Wisconsin, which obviously Molly Engstrom knows something about. So, I think that it's been impressive to watch this young team kind of come together early in the year, and now we'll get a chance to see what they do in Hockey East.
Yeah, and against a BU opponent that was ranked earlier in the season, that they're coming off a tough weekend against Northeastern. So it'll be interesting to see where both of these teams are at, because Molly Engstrom's team, Maine, they're pretty young. They're coming in with a lot of freshmen on this team. They've already gotten some key contributions, and I'm interested also to ask her about Kia Lahtinen, who has started all 9 games for Maine so far. She's looked really good. She's faced a lot of shots, but now with a little bit of extra experience in net, she's been having another good season.
All right, Molly Engstrom joins us now. Coach, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate a couple of minutes of your time. Why don't we start by talking about your young team? You've gotten some contributions already from freshmen. Can you tell us about some of the young people who have impressed you early this year?
All of them, honestly. We have 6 skaters. We have 3 forwards and 3 defensemen who are contributing to every part of the lineup. So really happy with where they're currently at right now. Like we've had a tough non-conference schedule heading in, up to this point. And I think the way that they responded specifically as first-year players is really impressive.
One of the things that we were mentioning before you came on was Alfond Arena, right? And the upgrades that you guys have put in. Tell us a little bit about the building now that the upgrades are finished and what you think that's going to be able to add to the program.
Yeah, the upgrades are unbelievable. I think the biggest thing that we've noticed is just the amount of time that we're able now to currently, be able to spend with our student athletes. Especially during the construction phase, we were across the street. So I think that had an impact on last year specifically. But yeah, now they can just walk upstairs. They've got their nice new beautiful lounge. They walk down the hall. All of our offices are right here. So I think the relationships are feeling a lot of that. Recruiting, I know you had mentioned leveling the playing field with some of these programs, and then just our student athlete experience has increased as a result.
Wanted to ask about Kia Lahtinen in net as well. 9 games so far for her. I saw in particular in that weekend series against Colgate, she stopped 75 of 80 shots. Just what have you thought of her so far this season? She's
unbelievable. I mean, any coach, any team would be excited about where we are with goaltending. I think Kia, it's been so impressive. She's only a sophomore. She came in as, second goalie last year, and our starter got injured in October. So she actually stepped in to play her first games in 2024 against BU. So I would imagine she's looking to kind of turn the storyline there. But ever since then, she's been the X factor a little bit for us. She's started the season really, really strong. So we're hoping to put a nice game together in front of her so we can start to see some wins.
Coach, one of the things we talked about the schedule a little bit, right? Whether it's, by choice or whatever the case is, you guys have scheduled really hard at the beginning of the season. Part of the reason for that, you would think, is to be able to gain something out of it. So what has been the thing that you've seen from your team that you hope that you've been able to get out of some of those games against really challenging opponents?
I think number one is just to compete. I wanted them to understand what the level of high level hockey looks like, and so I think that's been one of the things. They have competed hard. I think learning a little bit of that resiliency piece, and really at the end of the day, ultimately what it takes, to be a good hockey team, to be ranked. So yeah, I think they've done a good job of taking all of those things with them thus far. And we're looking, we're excited about heading into conference play as we started last weekend with Providence.
And this question more about you, I guess, than the team. It's an Olympic year. You had a big involvement in international women's hockey. Just what do you think of this upcoming play into the Olympics and what you're going to expect in February?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. I mean, historically, everything that I've known has been the residency years for both the U.S. team and Canada, where they spend the entire year together. So now with the PWHL and those players playing a pro season and then going to the Olympics, I think it's really exciting for the players and new for everyone. So we'll see how it goes.
Molly, we really appreciate a minute of your time. We're looking forward to seeing you guys this weekend on Saturday on Nesson against BU. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
That's Maine head coach Molly Engstrom. We'll talk more about that matchup and plenty more coming up on This Week in Hockey East.
It's time to go around the women's side of Hockey East for this weekend. We want to get to some of this weekend's key matchups, but first let's take a look back at last week's Jersey Mike's A Sub Above Player of the Week. Northeastern's Lily Shannon, the captain of that team. She has the most points per game in Hockey East so far, 1.63 points per game for her. And this past weekend, she had 2 goals and an assist in the 7-3 win on Saturday. Northeastern was able to sweep BU in that weekend series. So she's going to be our sub above player of the week. And Eric, Northeastern right now is one of the top teams on the women's side, not only in the standings, we're still early on, but in the rankings.
Yeah, they moved up to number 9. UConn jumped up to number 8. I think those are both deserved rankings based on what they've done so far. It's still early, but you look at where we are, top 4 teams right now, BC, Northeastern, UNH, and UConn. Again, very early. There's been different amount of games played for some of the teams so far, which obviously happens this time of year. But, it's hard not to be impressed with Northeastern. They go and sweep BU, a BU team that we'll talk about in a second that, really needed a win, and Northeastern did a really nice job of getting a sweep against them last weekend. So I don't know if I'd go so far as to say they're running away as the favorite, right? Because we know how good UConn is and some of these other teams as well. But very, very impressed with what we've seen from Northeastern so far. The team they just beat, BU, is going to be our showcase game on Saturday. Bridgette, they'll take on Maine. You've seen a lot of the Terriers so far this year. What stands out?
Yeah, so one thing that I think just still developing is the goalie situation. They have two good goaltenders, Michelle Pasechnik and Mari Peterson. Pasechnik coming in after the year off. She's had such an interesting storyline for her being the goalie of the year 2 years ago in all of college hockey. And definitely you can see her getting her feet under her. She starts the Friday game. Peterson starts the Saturday game, but gets pulled after giving up 4 goals. So does Michelle Pasechnik start to take over more time in net? I think that's a developing, interesting storyline to keep following as we get further into the season. And BU has been relying pretty heavily on Sydney Healy for scoring. She leads BU in goals, assists, and points. She's got 4 goals, 4 assists, 8 points, and she's factored into 53% of the Terriers' goals this season. So another question for me is, can they get some supplemental scoring from some of their talented younger players like Ineska Shabalova, Lexi Bertelson, Kira Healy, who's a defenseman but has a lot of offensive flair as well. I feel like all 3 of those players have come close on a lot of occasions in the last few games, but haven't found the back of the net. So that could be a difference for them in this series.
I mean, it feels like it's got to break through soon, right? I mean, they're so good, they're so talented. We think it'll be really interesting to see what they go and do up at Alphon this week. Another big matchup this weekend: Boston College and UConn. It's early, as we said, we know that, but the Eagles have banked themselves 11 points in the hockey standings so far. Yes, they've played more games than everyone else, but they've been strong. 3-1-1 in Hockey East play. Lost against Vermont on Friday last week, and then it was a 0-0 tie in the second game. But, we've talked a little bit about Ava Thomas on the show so far, Bridgette. She's been so good, deservedly was named the Hockey East Player of the Month combined between September and October. 14 points is the 3rd most nationally in points per game among any freshman entering this weekend. Challenge, though, obviously ratchets up with UConn a little bit. 2 1-goal games against Holy Cross last weekend, 2 1-goal wins against Holy Cross. Is that series ever super close? It's crazy. Every time, I think 5 in a row that those 2 teams have played either a 1-goal game or 1 plus an empty netter. But Kyla Josephobic, that's the person I think for UConn, right? We've talked a lot about, Pellerin and some of the other players on the top line, but Josephobic against Holy Cross scores the game winner Friday. She's up to 10 points now, which leads UConn. Very, very good offensively. And then Tia Chan, who is the person in goal for UConn now. Last couple of years splitting time with Megan Warner. Now it's her net. And she was great. She was the Hockey East goalie of the month. A .956 save percentage in September, October is 2nd in the country. So she's proving that even with the full-time workload, she's still just as good, if not a better goalie than she's been all throughout her career at UConn. Should be fun, BC and UConn this weekend. We'll wrap up with a little bit more This Week in Hockey East coming up next. Welcome back, folks. Let's go around Hockey East. It's presented by Boston Children's Hospital, the official children's hospital of Hockey East. Boston Children's, where the world comes for answers. Big weekend for Boston University. They play a couple of games against Merrimack. We'll talk about that briefly. But the big news, Jack Parker goes into the Hockey Hall of Fame on Monday. Much deserved, Bridgette. Let's talk a little bit more about the Terriers.
Yep. So I'll be broadcasting that game. It's actually, I think, going to be the first ever all-female broadcast of a BU men's game. It'll be me, Kaylee Fracken, and Caitlin Beal. We're filling in for Bernie and Mark, the normal broadcasters, because they're heading down to the ceremony for Jack Parker this weekend. The actual induction will be Monday, but there's festivities all weekend, so they're heading down there. And Bernie was actually really instrumental in helping Jack Parker get to this point, to get into the Hall of Fame. Basically, because he wasn't involved in the NHL, it's much harder to get in. But he ends up getting chosen in the builders category because Bernie was able to give all of these stats, all of these players that he influenced, all of these different careers that were touched by Jack Parker, who spent 47 years at BU, 40 of those as a head coach. They won 3 national titles. So obviously, in terms of college hockey, it's very obvious that he should be up in that category. But then you have to prove, all right, how did he impact NHL careers? So he coached 73 players who went on to play at least one game in the NHL, 143 NHL draft picks. And as of the start of this season, players that had played for Jack Parker at BU and went on to the NHL had played in 2,470 games. And so those are all games and players affected by him as a coach. And he also obviously had his hands on some Olympians like Mike Ruzioni, who talked about how he was important to his development as well as a hockey player. And when I talked to Jay Pandolfo, BU's current head coach, he said he thought it was long overdue. He's been a mentor and still is. He still talks to the program and with BU, still involved. And some other inductees in the Hall of Fame this week as well. Bruins defenseman Zdeno Chara, a big name that we were talking about around this area, and Joe Thornton as well. So there's a lot of Boston connections to the Hall of Fame induction Monday.
Yeah, I think it's obviously a really good thing, right? We saw Jerry York go into the Hockey Hall of Fame in this category a couple of years ago. It was nice to see Jerry at Matthews Arena last week, by the week. Northeastern having a couple of people important to other programs playing their last game at Matthews, dropped the ceremonial first puck. But, Jerry York talked about it at the time that there were definitely other college hockey coaches, including Jack Parker, who deserved to get into the Hockey Hall of Fame. And it's not the NHL Hall of Fame, right? It's the Hockey Hall of Fame. And yes, it had taken a little while from college guys to get recognized in that way. But I'm really, I think it's important, and it's really a good thing that it's happening. It's nice that, it's a couple of guys who were so important and instrumental to Hockey East who are going in the Hall of Fame. But, I think it's fitting that those two are kind of the first two, right? The two, that rivalry that we talk about all the time, how important that was throughout college hockey. So really exciting stuff. Congratulations to Jack Parker, and hope it's a really fantastic weekend. Quickly before we go, we mentioned this briefly last week, Bridgette, but I think it's worth just hitting on before we go. This college hockey season's been kind of crazy, right? I mean, we were joking about it a little bit earlier, excuse me, that all the teams we're talking about have split their weekends. It's because everyone's losing early in the season, right? Who are the best teams? Well, here's a crazy stat for you. Through 5 weeks of the season, 5 weekends so far, top 10 teams in the USCHL poll have already lost 13 times to unranked teams. Last year, through the same 5 weekends, it had only happened twice. So it's a massive difference. And there's probably a bunch of reasons why, right? The CHL guys, a lot of new players coming in, and it feels like just everybody has gotten better, which makes it such an interesting and awesome time to be covering college hockey. We can't wait to continue doing it all season long, but something to watch there. See if these top 10 teams can start to right the ship a little bit. Fun episode today, folks. Thanks so much for joining us. For Bridgette, I'm Eric. Enjoy the games this weekend, and we'll keep carrying on here as we cover Hockey East. Thanks so much for joining us for This Week in Hockey East on NESN.